So good morning, everyone. Absolute pleasure to get everyone involved with this webinar. Traditionally, we have, as an idea centre, focused around the idea generation process. We do a lot of work, as you know, as members of the idea centre. Then what we do is we put workshops together and help people understand the creative problem-solving process, the mechanisms, introduce techniques, and we create safe places to come and practice the techniques to drive the idea generation side of the innovation process, very much focusing on creativity. However, there's another half to the equation, very clearly, which is all to do with the innovation process. It's actually the implementation of this activity at the end as well, because generating the idea is great, but if you just sit back generating ideas and wait for things to happen, the innovation process inevitably fails. So we've been doing a whole host of activity, kind of pulling in various experiences around the innovation process and working with organizations to embed innovation. And that's precisely what the focus of this thing is all about. So this is less about the idea generation side of the equation, more about the implementation. It's about driving the implementation. I've just had a question popped up with regard to the slides, and yes, the slides will be made available at the end. I can make sure that everyone's got copies of all these slides. We'll circulate them around as PDFs just for ease of access as much as anything else. So that's fine. So at least we know the question and answer session works on this as well. What we're hoping to do by the end of this session is to give you a systematic approach to driving the innovation. That's the implementation side of the equation, driving the implementation activity, having generated ideas that are both novel and useful. And for me, this is all about seizing control. Organizations often sit back and expect that having trained creative facilitators up, that miraculously things will then flow through. And what we're missing is the leadership control. We need leaders within the organization to grab hold of the innovation process and make sure that it actually happens. And that's where we're going to focus here. In terms of the agenda, just bear with me, just make sure I can actually move the slides forward. In terms of the agenda, we're going to be talking about the innovation process very clearly. We want to talk initially about the problem with innovation. There's a whole range of stuff. As with creativity, innovation brings a whole bunch of baggage. There's a whole bunch of misinformation around the place. And what we thought we'd do is just clarify what we mean by innovation in the first place. We then need to identify where it is we want to focus. Where is it we want to drive the innovation process? Again, we talk to loads of organizations about this stuff, and quite commonly people will say, well, that's fine, but we now need to decide where we want the innovation process to be. How do we do that? And we've got some tools and techniques that we can share with you that hopefully will help drive that particular process and clarify where you might want to focus. Then once you've got the focus, you've applied the creative processes, then what you need to do is to make sure it happens, make sure the implementation is actually followed through. So dead simple agenda. What's the problem with innovation? What are the issues associated with it? Once we've got that clear, where are we going to focus? And then once you know where you're going to focus and you've applied the creativity, then how are you actually going to make it happen? So that's where we're going to go in terms of an agenda with this material. In more full, if you like, kind of exploding that out a little bit, we'll look at the understanding in the first place. We've got a series of models then that we want to introduce in terms of where to focus. We are yet to introduce the Idea Centre 2x2 matrix, so I think the time has come to launch this upon an unsuspecting world. We've got a nice 2x2 matrix that provides you with a structure that will allow you to unpick some of the innovation process. I will share that with you. We have an intriguing exercise called the Barockaday exercise that some of you have been exposed to before, but I'll clarify that. A really elegant technique for looking at how to diversify into new marketplaces or how to extend your service offering, glamorously referred to as morphological analysis, which we'll probably rebrand that at some point. And then multiple cause analysis. But then we'll focus on making it happen. And this is going to be about structures that are required to embed it inside the organization. That's where we're going to go with all this stuff. So hopefully this will all kind of make sense and piece together as we go through. Quick question has popped up. Let me just ask that. Another question with regard to slides. And yes, of course, the slides, as I said before, will be made available to everyone at the end of this exercise. So you better get access to all that. Simple definitions. Now, I'm conscious that the majority of people will know this stuff, so I'll go through it quite quickly, but I'm also conscious that one or two people are involved in the webinar that maybe haven't seen this material. So key issues we need to clarify to start up with are definitions. We talk to loads of organizations about the innovation process. Two key words crop up. Clearly, innovation is one of those, and creativity is the other. Almost every organization in one form or another claims to be innovative by our experience. Organizations will often have it in their mission statement. It'll be in their values. Plenty of organizations have it within personal objectives. The killer thing for me is loads of organizations are doing it and using the word and marketing themselves as innovative companies. But if you ask those organizations what they mean by the word innovation, therein lies the acid test. And very, very few organizations are able to actually clearly articulate what they mean by innovation. And here's my test. If you're claiming it as an organization, and it's one of the key differentiators, any two members of staff should be asked, when asked, what do you mean by innovation? Should give you exactly the same answer. And therein lies the test. And that's the hurdle that most organizations will fail with. Creativity increasingly is becoming high profile, and organizations are recognizing and starting to rehearse the words around creativity. But again, very few actually understand what it means. It's seen as something that's pink and fluffy. You've probably got someone in marketing who does something a little bit creative, or you have a creative agency that does all that, because the hardcore macho thing for an organization to do is drive the innovation process. But very clearly, without creativity, you cannot drive innovation once you understand what the meaning of these words is. So let me just kick off with a simple definition of creativity. Creativity is simply the process of generating ideas that are both novel and useful. It's as simple as that. It's about idea generation, and it's that unique combination of novelty and usefulness. It's not creative, generate a useful idea that's not novel, but it is useful. And the vast majority of the time in any organization, you actually don't want creativity. What you want is useful ideas help an organization tick over day by day, minute by minute. What you need is lots and lots of useful ideas. But every now and then, you know that those useful ideas aren't cutting it, and you need a different approach. And that's when you need breakthrough thinking or novelty injected into the idea generation process. And that's where the creativity is applied. So a nice simple definition of creativity: it's generating ideas that have a combination of novelty, I hadn't thought of that before, and usefulness, and I want to do something with it. It's as simple as that. And then the sister definition, if you like, for innovation is very simply making money or adding value out of the creative process. So it's generating an idea that's novel and useful, and then implementing it. So idea center sessions tend to focus around creative problem solving techniques, which are all geared at developing the facilitation skills to do the ideation side of it, generating those novel and useful ideas. But if those ideas just sit doing nothing, then it's a waste of time, because you're not carrying it through into the innovation process. So you've got two halves of this equation. When it comes to innovation, you've got the creativity side, which is idea generation, and then you've got the implementation side, which is actually making the innovation real in such a way that will add value and ideally boost the profitability of the organization. I know many organizations, certainly in the third sector, charitable sector, public sector, will look at making money as not being a core requirement. But what I mean by that is making your money go further. And I reckon every organization wants to take the money they've got and make it go further. And that's what we mean by implementing and driving innovation. So those are simple definitions. And again, conscious that many of you know this, so I'll rattle through it at a reasonable pace. Stuff we know in any organization, and in any organization, in any sector, quite frankly. Universal constant. The world around us is changing at a phenomenal exponential rate. And it's not surprising, because the rate of change fuels the rate of change. So the quicker things happen, almost by definition, the quicker things will happen thereafter. So you have this kind of takeoff, this exploding universe of opportunity, which is brilliant for innovative, entrepreneurial, creative organizations, because it means there's always new stuff around the place that will make a profound effect on the organization. And you might refer to this as a world of what might be, which is brilliant. So this is all good news, because it means if you're an innovative organization, all you have to do is have mechanisms for tapping into this exploding universe of opportunity, and woof, you're off on your next innovation journey. But we as individuals, and collectively as cultures within organizations, we can't keep up with this rate of change. This rate of change is just too fast for us. We can improve over time, but we improve at a much, much slower rate, because fundamentally, we make sense of our worlds by looking backwards. So if we're going to sit and make a decision about what to do next or to solve a problem, the only thing we can do at the start is to look at our past experience, our knowledge, our training, our education, stuff that's happened in our past. And we can share it with other people, because different people have different pasts. So we can knock it all around and learn off each other. We're good at this. We can learn off each other. But fundamentally, we look backwards, and based on that backward-looking perspective, we then decide today how we're going to behave in the future. So we can improve, but we improve at a much, much slower rate. And we get trapped, effectively, in a world of what is. And this world of what is beautifully well behaved because everything is based on, broadly, what's happened before with a small incremental improvement. And we're surrounded by an atmosphere that locks us into that world. And that atmosphere is conventional and traditional thinking. And it keeps us beautifully safe and warm. Now, the snag is that it also locks us out to this universe of what might be. And so we get locked in our small world and we make all our decisions in our organizations trapped in this world of what is. What we need to do is to find ways of breaking free, selectively maybe, but we want to break free from time to time from this world of what is to see if we can access this fantastic universe of opportunity. And the snag is that it's difficult. And the reason it's difficult is because we have mental blocks in place. And these mental blocks are almost, they're almost knitted into our DNA. These are fundamental behaviors and traits that we all suffer from. There are things that lock us in this world of what is, that keep us safe and warm. This is fight or flight or evolutionary stuff. Days gone by, if you do something outrageous out of the ordinary, you could lose your life, for goodness sake. Things have moved on and that doesn't happen quite so much now. However, the DNA still carries that caution within our fabric. And we can never, ever make those mental blocks go away. But if we know that they're there, we can choose to use techniques that will allow us to overcome them. Basically, that's what we do as the Idea Center with the creative problem-solving techniques. We recognize those blocks and help organizations understand it, but then introduce techniques that allow them to overcome them, and then give the facilitation skills to deliver those. And that's what the creative process is all about. However, and as ever, there's a however, just generating the ideas is only part of the story, because what we really need to do that's going to make the difference, that will actually deliver the transformation, is to deliver the innovation process as well. And that's where we're going to focus today. Now, we know that lower curve, that world of what is, that develops on an evolutionary basis, is all very cool, but this is effectively the continuous improvement curve. What we're doing is making small incremental improvements over time that are broadly consistent with this world in which we're locked. And that's effectively what continuous improvement is all about. It's about making the world in which we're trapped a better world in which to be trapped. That's fundamentally limiting. And will not overcome those mental blockages. What we need to do from time to time is to introduce step change into the process. We like continuous improvement, but on top of the continuous improvement, we need to be able to drive the step change process. And these step changes aren't continuous, they are discontinuous improvement. And they're based on doing things differently. And they have to be led top down, because we're going to be fundamentally challenging the model of our organization. That world in which we're trapped, our world of what is here, is going to be fundamentally challenged, and we need leadership skills to drive through the step changes that will manhandle and change that structure. So leadership skills are key here, and that's going to be one of our major points of focus. And that way we can do sequential step changes and fundamentally drive the innovation process. So that's where we're going to go. So we want a combination of continuous improvement, that's bottom up, that's a cultural thing. But on top of it, we want to drive the step change, and we need leadership in order to drive this through, and that will deliver the innovation. So, stuff that stifles innovation is kind of the problem with innovation, if you like. The stuff that stifles innovation and gets in the way of it. And you read about it, you hear it, you talk to organizations from small to large that go about driving the implementation process. And there's some recurring themes that come in here. One is that organizations will often sit there, and certainly the leadership teams will sit there and go, you know what, when you look at it, we've not done that badly, and we are developing over time, and things are improving over time. And if you look at the shift in profit of the organization, you look back at our track record, and really we've improved things over time. So you know what, we're not that bad an organization after all, and maybe we really are driving innovation. So we don't need to do anything differently. We just need to continue that upward trend of growth in profitability, or well, just look at sales, for goodness sake. But that's the placating, that will kind of be the self-reassuring approach to innovation, is to say, well, you know what, we're kind of doing this anyway. But what we're looking at here basically is organic growth. This is a continuous improvement process. There is a natural process as organizations season and develop. If they're well managed, of course, you'll expand sales, you'll increase profitability. So you will have that natural trend. but you're not challenging the model. You're evolving the model. This is a continuous improvement trend. Where you've got step changes, most organizations that claim to have significant step changes, if they look back, they're often the result of acquisitions. It's mergers and acquisition activity. And what you're doing there effectively is buying in the step change process and then retrospectively saying, well, crikey, look how innovative we were. But it's a bought-in innovation process. What you're not doing is embedding innovation in the fabric of the organization. But what it does allow you to do is to sit back and say, well, actually, we don't need to do anything different because, look, we're doing this stuff already. Unacceptable. That is not what the innovation process is about. The other one is risk-taking. People often associate the innovation process with a willingness to take risk. And what they will often do is say that, well, as an organization, we need to change the culture. What we need to do is to accept failure. We need to be risk takers. We need to have a culture that accepts all this stuff. And this again is misleading. We know from all the activity that we've been doing within the Idea Center, the organizations we've worked with, my personal experience in driving creativity into organizations of loads of different sectors over the last 30 years, there is no reason why you should become a wild risk taker, a gambler, when it comes to driving the innovation process. What we should be doing is identifying opportunities and then mitigating the associated risk. And often, the innovation process, we know, will come by removing blockages to the way we think and reveal different ways in which we can deliver stuff. And once you remove the blockage, you often find that there is minimal risk associated with that particular change process. That step change may have zero risk associated with it. And the clever organizations are those that recognize this and set about mitigating that particular risk. So the risk-taking thing, red herring, absolutely not applicable. What we need is a culture change. What we need to do is it's a waste of time embarking on this innovation journey until we fundamentally change the culture of the organization. We need to take risks. We need to help people transform, and they need to think differently. What we need is a culture change. This is, again, an excuse for doing absolutely nothing. Culture change, if you look at the documentation, to get a culture change that is truly embedded in an organization for a medium-sized upward organization is going to take up to 8 years before it's truly embedded. So if you want to drive innovation, but you're worried about culture change first, then basically what we're going to suggest you do is sit back. Just sit back for maybe 8 years. And then on the end of the 8 years, you'll be ready for the innovation process, which is clearly not going to be appropriate. So this culture change, these are a whole bunch of reasons why people are hiding behind the innovation process. What they also say is we need to set up an innovation pipeline. What we need to do is we need to have a culture that will just pump innovation opportunities in front of the management team, and we can pick and choose and select what the innovation is. What we need is this kind of pipeline. But what people often do is draw an innovation funnel. What we need to do is to get everyone involved in it. This is a bottom-up process. We're going to get everyone involved in generating ideas. We'll pull those ideas together and we'll evaluate those ideas. We'll then develop a selected number, we'll weed some out, we'll test them, and then we'll have an implementation process. And look, if you look at this representation as a graphic, it's a beautifully well-behaved process. You put lots of ideas at the front end and you get a number of implementations out at the back end. But you're kidding yourself, quite frankly, because the vast majority of funnels, and I'd argue that this is an optimistic funnel, even this redrawing of it is, you get loads and loads of ideas, you have a vast mechanism that has to evaluate all these ideas. The vast majority of these ideas are going to be continuous improvement ideas. You're driving it on a bottom-up process. The chances that anyone at the lower levels in the organization will generate an idea that would transform the effectiveness or efficiency of the organization that, I don't know, might halve the labor cost to deliver exactly the same services. Chances of someone coming up with that idea, remarkably remote. What they'll do is they'll tweak and refine and improve things around the edges. You'll have loads of those to weed through. You go through the development process, that'll be harder than you thought, actually driving it through. Very, very few will get into test, and some, maybe a minute number, if any, will go through the implementation process. And what you're doing basically is crossing your fingers and saying, well, let's put a mechanism in place, and we as a management team will then sit back and just wait and see what happens. And this is an abdication of responsibility. What we're saying as a leadership team is, Okay, we've got a mechanism, now let's wait. Let's hope that someone comes up with a great breakthrough idea. Where's the leadership in that? Where's the guidance in that? It lets the leadership team off the hook, which is unacceptable. These top-down changes, the innovation process has to be driven leadership down. Now, you can get everyone involved in the implementation of it, but the identification of where you want to achieve the step changes, the unlocking of the thinking has to be driven on a top-down basis. The creativity skills, the facilitation skills are there to service the unlocking of that thinking. The other thing you'll come across, and there are many case studies around this area that have some great examples, Post-it notes are a classic example of 3M introducing skunk works, where they'll maybe trying to encourage loads of people to separate off into separate units. This idea of creating a specialist team will break a part of the organization off. This is kind of favored for the larger organizations, where we'll say, well, this small group of people can drive the innovation process. And there are two fundamental flaws with this. One is that if that is a successful innovation, what you end up with is a mini culture that is completely separate from the main culture of the organization, and that is unacceptable back in the main culture because you've got a bunch of mavericks. And successful innovations that are driven by these specialist teams typically break out. What you do is hive them off into a separate business unit because they developed a life and a culture all of their own. They don't fit back in the parent organization. And what it also does simultaneously is creates an opportunity for everyone else in the organization to basically say, well, it's the specialist team that's driving the innovation. It's nothing to do with me. Good luck with generating an innovation culture if what you're doing is separating off a specialist team or one or two key individuals to do the innovation. Because if someone's got innovation in their job title, clearly those that don't have it in their job title don't need to do it. You're not going to transform the culture. And those that are not involved will systematically kill the innovation process, because whatever idea is being generated isn't consistent with what we normally do around here. So we've got this number of these kind of stifling influences that we need to overcome. So kind of hold those thoughts in your mind as we go through to the next stage, because what we really need to do is to understand that the main problem with innovation is that we don't seize control of it. What we don't do is step forward and take accountability for the innovation process. And what we're extolling here, what we'd recommend is that organizations need to step forward with an accountability at a senior level and say, we want to drive a systematic approach to innovation. We want to seize control of it and make it happen. And the recommendation is that you should look across the leadership team, the senior management team in an organization, and encourage each senior manager, each member of that senior leadership team to take at least one innovation challenge within a budget or financial year. So they should be stepping forward and saying, well, I, as a senior leader in the organization, I have a strategic role to create a sustainable competitive advantage. That is what the innovation process will deliver. This is a step change that I will take responsibility for delivering. Now, you can let yourself off the hook. You can look at certain members of the management team and say, well, they're not going to do this. So what you can do is just choose one or two and use them on a pilot basis. But as long as you recognize you're letting the rest of the management team off the hook, maybe pilot it to test it and prove it. But once it's tested and proven, in my books, if someone's going to be a senior manager in the organization, they should be owning their element of the innovation process. And it fits in every part of the organization, as you're about to see. So hopefully this is making sense. I'm just going to pause and have a quick squint over various questions and see if there are any other questions that are coming out. Okay, so there are a number of questions around perspective. And whether or not this, broadly how this fits with the continuous improvement program. And what we'll do is pick up some of those issues later, if that's all right, because this approach to driving the innovation process sits perfectly cheek by jowl with the continuous improvement process. Continuous improvement is a continuous evolution. It's incremental steps, and we'd like lots of them. We're looking for useful ways of moving the organization forward. What we're not doing within continuous improvement is fundamentally challenging the core business models that lie at the heart of the organization. That's where we need step change, and that's where we need the leadership skills to actually drive this forward. Okay, so moving on. I think we've cleared those questions. So, where from here? Where are we going to focus the innovation process? And as I said, we've been missing. We've been chased after. Where is our 2x2 matrix? Well, here's our 2x2 matrix. A self-respecting external consultant or advisor should have one of these. And this is a way of breaking down and mapping where you might want to focus your innovation process within your organization. And what we're looking at is the markets in which you're operating, both existing markets, of which you're very familiar, and the new markets that you might aspire to move into. You've also got your existing products or services, and you've got the existing side of your current activity, and you've got the potential to develop new products and services to address any host of different marketplaces. Now, this is an interesting framework, because if you get a group of people together and say, right, fine, well, within this matrix, where is the innovation? Where does innovation lie? What many individuals, organizations will do, will say clearly that it's in this top right-hand corner. This is what the innovation process is all about. We might call this blue sky innovation, because what we're delivering is new products or services into new markets that we don't particularly understand. This is classic, hardcore, high-risk innovation. This is the stuff of the Clockwork Radio. This is the stuff of, I remember that Trevor Bayliss was a serial entrepreneur and innovator who had this great idea that he could solve communication mechanisms within remote areas, and he's been successful in delivering it over time. But this idea of having a clockwork radio that didn't need batteries, didn't need electricity to fire up, so you could operate it anywhere. This was a completely new marketplace for him. This was a completely new product or service in which he had no experience whatsoever. It took years. It took a fortune to bring it forward to actually delivery. And there is the problem with this blue sky classic version of innovation. Amazon would be another example. Amazon took forever before they eventually moved into profit, because what they were doing was using new technology, new services to address a marketplace that didn't even exist. They were creating a marketplace, and it took a shed load of cash, just gobbled it up before it eventually matured and delivered into a profitable business model. Goodness knows from a cash flow analysis over their lifetime where they actually sit in terms of return on investment. But this is high risk stuff, and this is classically how people view innovation. However, if you pause long enough and just get people to stare at this, people will eventually identify there are probably two other areas. You can look at your existing marketplace and look at the opportunity to develop new products or services that could operate in there. Now you're keeping one foot in safe ground. You're working in an existing marketplace in which you're comfortable, but you're looking to develop new products and services that are going to be where the innovation lies. And this is medium risk, because you've got 1 foot in safe territory as you gently tiptoe out and move into this new product service area. This is disruptive innovation, but it's medium risk, much lower than the blue sky Monte Carlo style of innovation. Equally, you can take existing products and services, look at what you already do, and see if you can extend it into different marketplaces. Again, you understand your products and services inside out. You're an expert in those areas, but you're now going to tentatively move into new market spaces with a potential to break through. Again, you've mitigated the risk. You're now looking at a medium risk innovation strategy. Now, many will then say, well, that's it then. That's kind of the innovation makeup. That's kind of that's the landscape in which we're operating. Because this existing products and existing marketplace, that's home territory, for goodness sake. That's not an innovation opportunity. That's kind of what we normally do. And in fact, many people will classify this area as being the continuous improvement area, that what you're looking to do in this area is play at home in your marketplaces with the current product services and just generally move things forward. This is continuous improvement. It's not exciting because there's no innovation opportunity here, which is wrong. Because what we've experienced over the last 5 years of existence of the Idea Centre and 30 years of my personal experience driving the innovation process in organizations, there is enormous opportunity to drive the innovation process in existing marketplaces using your existing products and services. And we call this sustaining innovation. And this is phenomenally low risk because you've got both feet in very safe, familiar ground. And this is a fantastic opportunity to drive major differentiation in the organization at minimal risk. And what we're going to do is just spend a bit of time just fleshing this out, because what you can do ultimately is get a senior team together and say, right, fine, what's our risk appetite? Where do we want our risk to lie? And what you can do is strategically decide in each of these boxes, how do you want to split your innovation activity? We want to know where you want to innovate. Well, here's the opportunity to at least start mapping it out from a risk profile. If you've got low risk, don't go into blue sky. If you're really low risk, stay in sustaining space. Recognize that you can engineer your own portfolio and your attitude towards risk. That's going to be absolutely critical. But let's just drill down and understand the sustaining innovation a little bit and introduce this thing called the Berocca Day exercise, which is quite cool. I'm actually in conversation with Berocca to see if we can actually market this, use this as a label for this, formally for this approach, and actually launch a whole bunch of products on the back of it, or services on the back of it. Now, the Berocca Day, now, I'm not sure if people remember the Berocca Day advert. There's a particular advert which kind of summarizes what this stuff's about. Berocca is a product, it's a tonic, basically. It's an orange-flavored tonic in tablet form, typically. Put it in water, it fizzes up, you drink it. My word, does it change your day. You have a belting day on the back of it. It's owned by Bayer, and it's Bayer that I'm actually in conversation with on this in terms of branding. Now, I've got a clip here which actually has the advert in it. I'm going to play it. Now, the audio is going to be a bit weird because it's coming out of the PC and going to be recorded by the mic, so it's quite low. Don't worry about the audio. The key thing is to watch, A, what's happening, because these lumberjacks here are about to have their life transformed, and look at the strap line that comes at the end of it. So here we go. These guys have clearly had their Berocca tablets. Look at this.
Berocca, you put on a really good day.
There it is. There's the strap line. You put on a really good day. And that kind of encapsulates what this Berocca Day exercise is all about. And I can wholly recommend undertaking this exercise. Now, we can offer assistance. We can actually come in and do it on a facilitated basis, more structured, but quite frankly, it's not rocket science. As with any of this stuff, it's quite straightforward. What we recommend on a Berocca Day transforms your day. You take one of these tablets, you will have a day to remember. Nothing goes wrong on a Berocca Day. Everyone is energetic. Now, bring that to real life in your own organization. Imagine your organization on a Berocca Day, the entire organization, where absolutely everything works perfectly. Look at your cost base, look at the current revenue streams that you have, look at the underlying cost base, just get a picture of that on a daily basis. What does a day of revenue look like? What does a day of cost look like? Then consider how what the performance of the organization would be if it was a Berocca Day. What would the impact be on elimination of waste? There will be no waste, for goodness sake, because nothing goes wrong on a Berocca Day. Absolutely every approach to a client leads to an order. You get phone calls coming in with people delighted, beating a path to your door, wanting to do business. If you consider at each level, what would happen if everyone was engaged to the maximum extent? What would the productivity look like? Organizations settle for, I don't know, rates of engagement of what, 50, 60%, and say, well, that's kind of about average. Why do you accept its average? On a Berocca Day, everyone would be passionately engaged, driving out waste, negotiating their best deals they could on supply of materials and services. The indirect activity would just be magical, the buzz around the office area, and look at what the impact on the profit will be on that one particular day. The government has done a whole bunch of work around engagement. They've invested a whole bunch of money in research in this particular area. And this is kind of a particularly interesting graph here. Because what they've done here, they've taken the top 50 companies, they're kind of nominally the same-ish in terms of format. They're global organizations. They're in the FTSE 100, all those good things. So it's just to normalize it, they're typical organization. Large, I'll grant you, but that just gives you a good averaging feel to it. What they've done is they've looked at the effective gross margin or operating margin and tracked that and correlated it with the level of engagement of staff. And if you look at it, the generic thing here, at low traditional engagement levels, you've got about 10% operating margin. By the time you get to high, this is the top state of the art. These are the top organizations. That operating margin, that gross margin explodes to near 30%. That's almost a threefold enhancement in operating margin, which is largely going to come from labor. Look at how much more effective and efficient an organization could be simply by addressing engagement. So rather than accepting that you might sit somewhere between low and high traditional, and say, well, that's normal. Why not strive for the ultimate? Because look at the effect it could have on an organization. To do it, you have to change the model for the culture. You have to think differently. And that's what the innovation is all about. You can innovate by moving from a low traditional engagement through to a very high. You will only do it not by incremental improvement, but by fundamental step change. And by step change, you can enhance massively the bottom line performance of the organization. Because we've done this exercise with a raft of organizations. And generically, I'll give you the outcome here. You typically see minimum in a year. Because what you do is you look at it in a day, but then scale it up to 365 days. So look at a single Barocca day. It's an outstanding day. Then scale it up and say, well, I'm going to be even more demanding from an innovation point of view. I want every day to look like a Barocca day. What you discover is over a year, you typically, now it depends on the organizations, but if you get everyone involved at a senior level, you can double the revenues of the organizations and probably quadruple the profitability. That's a 300% increase in profitability. Now, organizations, if you ask the question, why do you want to innovate? It's typically going to be to grow the organization, to stay ahead of the competition. This is the delivery here that we're looking at. Doubling revenues and quadrupling profits are driven out of sustaining innovation with minimal risk. You're not moving to new marketplaces. You're not delivering new products and services. You're simply looking at the cost base. So what I'm doing here, I think rather enthusiastically, much to everyone's surprise, is extolling the virtues of looking at this thing called sustaining innovation. Because what you're then able to do is to say, well, look, let's spread across here and let's have a look at where our activity ought to focus. And again, typical only. This is an example only. What you might find is that you might want to mitigate your risk, steer clear of the very high-risk Monte Carlo innovation processes. You want some of this new stuff. You might be constrained in that you're in a monopoly position, you demand a marketplace. You might be very limited as to what you can do in sustaining in terms of revenue, so maybe you need to move into new marketplaces. However, you could certainly address your cost base. So you've got a whole range of things here that we can play with. All of these moving parts start to help you understand where to focus your innovation process. So hopefully this is making sense. And what we can do, you can use this, you can construct it yourself in a loose conversation, or you can have an external facility, someone like maybe the Idea Center can come and get involved and help you understand and drive how this process will actually map out. Now, if we're going to look at moving into new marketplaces, again, that's fine to say that in the previous graph, we go back, we said we've got 20% here, we're going to look at new marketplaces here, we're going to look at breakthrough innovation, we're going to look at disruptive innovation down here, looking at new services. We need help now as to how to do that. And we have a tool for that as well. And the tool we'd recommend for that is something called morphological analysis, a bit of a mouthful, but that's the way the technique is kind of framed. And morphological analysis works like this. Basically what you do along the x-axis is you look at what are called your knowledge assets. And this involves a degree of analysis, but what you're looking to do is to identify what are your key capabilities, that's your core functionality, and try and distill it down to the smallest set. You'll have lots of capabilities, but what are the core functionalities of the organization that distinguish you from other organizations? What's the core competence and what are the core technologies? And what you need to do is to break those down into what we refer to as knowledge assets. And once you understand what your capability, your competence, your technology is all about, then what you're able to do is to map those, just identify a handful of these along the x-axis here. What you then do on the y-axis is look at the potential marketplaces that you might like to address. So there's a series of sectors. These are all new sectors for you, but you've kind of, from your marketing, from your sales activity, you've identified a number of sectors you might like to address. And what we're going to do then is look at a map that will help identify where you've got clear overlap between capability, competence, or technology and the various sectors. And we're going to use a simple key which looks at the quality of the match, where your knowledge assets match well to the particular sector. And again, in a very, very structured way. Remember, this creativity stuff demands a systematic approach. There are processes, logical left brain processes, that underpin both creativity and innovation. This is straightforward. You look at your knowledge assets, look at your target markets, map out where you've got a strong match, a partial match, a poor match. This identifies where you've got a market opportunity that will be easiest to access and therefore mitigate your risk. And clearly here, in this particular example, sector 3 is the one we're going to go for. That's got to be the first choice. If that's a potential market to move in, look at the quality of the fit, for goodness sake. You might look at sector one. Sector one's going to need a bit of work around one of the competencies and some of the technologies you need to develop. But now you're developing a roadmap. You can choose where you want to go, and you are analytically dissecting the innovation process to give you a roadmap as to determine where you're going to focus your innovation activities. So this is a neat tool for doing the market analysis. But what you're also able to do is look at the other axis. So rather than just looking at breakthrough innovation and marketplaces on the x-axis, what you might choose to do is look at your existing marketplace, look at your existing knowledge assets, and see if you can identify, I mean, clearly you've got a good match here because you're operating in this marketplace. See if you can identify another knowledge asset that will start to transform this particular marketplace in which you're operating, that will disrupt the marketplace and give you a sustainable source of competitive advantage. Now you know, you've screened the marketplace to see where you might go, but in your existing marketplace, the same tool will allow you to identify the knowledge assets that you need to develop in-house in order to drive your innovation process. And bingo, you're now beginning to put together a roadmap of the innovation for the organization. You've identified what your risk spread is, what your risk portfolio will be, where you're prepared to take medium risk and identify new stuff, moving to new areas, whether it's markets or extending your in-house skills. You're beginning to develop a roadmap with this tool that will then provide you with the wherewithal to manage the process. So morphological analysis, really neat tool, not rocket science, but a systematic way of laying the whole thing out. So what we've got here is we've got a number of tools. We've got the innovation 2x2 matrix, which allows you to map risk. You've got the Barocca-Day exercise, which helps kind of bring into sharp focus the sustaining innovation opportunity. And then you've got morphological analysis that allows you to look at those other areas, moving into new marketplaces or extending your service and product offering by extending your knowledge assets. Multiple cause analysis is quite a useful tool to layer on top of this, and many of you will be very familiar with multiple cause analysis, but this is a useful way for taking a top-level step change, but then exploding it and understanding what the makeup of the problem might be. So, for example, if your step change was going to be you wanted a step function change in revenues, for example, what you might say is, well, what are the issues that sit underneath that? That's how multiple cause works. You're mapping out. You're not trying to solve a problem. You're trying to understand the hierarchy of sub-issues that sit below the top-level issue. So what we'll do here with step function change in revenues, you say, well, what are the issues that sit underneath that? You might identify, first of all, by the way, that the step function change in revenue is actually a sub-problem behind actually getting a step function change in profit. So we're looking up the chain. You then look back down the chain, and what you might identify is step function change in revenues. You've got new markets, you've got market share, you've got markets down here. You've got step reduction in cost. This is very much a sales focus here. But then you expand that out further, and all of a sudden, what we're starting to do is to identify that here we've got some operational input, we've got reduction in materials and overheads. This top-level issue about a step function change in revenues is beginning to involve a whole host of people across the organization. And what you might identify to start off with is that people will say, well, the innovation step change is dramatic increase in sales. So clearly it's a sales issue. That's it. Sales director has this, owns it. But when you blow it out, what you recognize is that actually the sub-issues that sit behind that top-level issue demand the involvement of a whole range of other functions, all contributing to that top-level step change in the organization. And what you might do is filter it and say, well, out of all those, we can't do all of those, but let's identify the ones that are critical. So these are the ones that are critical. Now the entire team across the leadership team is involved in supporting the sales director in taking accountability for that top-level change. That's how the multiple cause analysis works here. And if you look at the whole piece, all of that involves a major step change in the culture of the organization. That's what we've got down here in the bottom left-hand corner. And this is probably an HR function and responsibility. If someone's going to take accountability for this, the question is, who's it going to be? Let's look at the HR function and see. So you can begin to map out how a single top-level step change then starts to explode and involve a number of other people across the organization. You're trying to identify people who are prepared to be accountable to drive this change process. So in terms of where to focus, we're getting much, much greater clarity. Now, this is an example only. This is a worked example, I know that. And every specific organization will have their own series of multiple cause analyses. And obviously, we can help, but there are many, you've got the skills within your organization in the creative facilitation to do it for yourselves. And remember, what we're doing all the time at the Ideas Center is not trying to do it to you. We want you to do it for yourselves. And that's kind of the model and how this works. I don't remember, I'm babbling through some of this, I know that. You're going to get a copy of this and you'll actually be able to piece through and hopefully make sense of it at your leisure. So this is great. We've got some ideas. We've identified where we want to play. We know the step change. Each of the senior team are saying, well, I'll be accountable. I'll step forward and I'll take ownership of this. I know my role as a leader. We've blown it apart with a multiple course analysis. We've managed the spread of risks because we've mapped it out and we know where we're going to focus. We've done the Barocca Day exercise, which was really quite enlightening because all of a sudden we're quite interested in sustaining innovation as well as this high risk stuff or higher risk stuff. So we know that. And we've got some ideas on how to do it. We've done the analysis. We've done the creativity. So we've broken through the thinking and we've got a whole bunch of novel and useful ideas that will make a profound effect. Question now is how we're going to make it happen. How are we going to follow it through? And here's the issue. First of all, you need to understand why innovation fails. There are a whole bunch of reasons why innovation fails. And again, I've got a really nice video here, which hopefully will work and click through. So see how the sound works on this, but hang in there. It's a really neat video. I'll send you the link. You'll get the material.
Thank you for your time and welcome to our focus group. Today we're going to show you an idea and ask for your opinion. This is called a wheel. Now, according to its developers, it'll change the way we work and live. Why? Because it rolls. It can also be added to wagons to make moving a heavy load easier. Your opinions? If it rolls, that means it could roll away and get lost, right? Or it could roll over your foot. It's the round shape that disturbs me. It's very feminine. I can't imagine any caveman wanting to be seen with that. I wouldn't. And this added to wagons thing, it sounds very complicated. Is there an easier version? You know what? Do you have it in square? No square. If it was a square one that didn't roll, then maybe I would think about my one.
There you have it. Great idea, killed. And that, to me, that summarizes it all. You have the best idea. They won't get implemented because they're different, almost by definition, which is why you need the leadership foot behind it. You need a mechanism, because our attitude to innovation, we systematically kill it because we leap into judgment. We apply what we call second stage thinking. Left brain logical analysis says that won't work because. And that's the default mode that we have. If it's different from the world in which we're locked or trapped, our world of what is, we'll kill the idea. Because we've got outdated patterning systems. We're using internal patterns and our judgment is based on our historic understanding of the world. If we're driving stuff that will have a profound effect on the organization in the future, those old outdated patterns are simply getting in the way. They're stopping us drive forward the implementation of the innovation, and we have to find mechanisms to overcome them. So what we need is a culture of innovation. What we need is a supportive environment that doesn't systematically kill these ideas. And my favorite adage, I think, of all time within a management perspective is what you don't measure, you can't control. And organizations talk about culture change, but they have no mechanism for measuring what the culture is. There are various dipstick mechanisms around the place to give you a feel, but it's all based on gut judgment and feel. And it varies from part to part. We've got no quantifiable measure of the culture. And therein lies our fundamental problem when it comes to driving the creative change process, delivering a culture of creativity and innovation. So what we've got here is a tool. We've developed a tool within the Idea Center that will allow you to break down the innovation styles that operate within the organization, get everyone involved. We've got a questionnaire that allows us to break down those innovation styles into 12 different subheadings. Now, there are lots of questionnaire tools around the place that will break down your culture in lots of different ways. I don't they're all applicable. There's no doubt about that. What we've done, we've used this, I've used this over the last 30 years in lots of different organizations in different sectors. And again, as ever, I'm going to say this stuff works. We've got a mechanism that allows us to take a snapshot of the culture, and we've got definitions of each of these that we can provide. And what you're able to do via the questionnaire system is to identify whether there's a high amount or a low amount of each one of these different characteristics in the organization. And what you can do is build up a profile. By looking at questionnaire analyses, you can see this organization is very low on the achievement side, which is where people strive for achievement, but very high on the conventional style over here, where people just do it the same old way. There are rules and procedures in this bureaucratic organization, and there's a strong dependency. I won't do things unless I get permission to do things. So the idea of radically breaking free is going to be a major problem in a culture that's dominated by these particular types of characteristics. Now, there is nothing magic particularly about this cultural profile, but it opens up a particular opportunity if you use it in a specific way. Because not only can you take a snapshot of the current culture, what you can then do is get a small group of people together, possibly the leadership team for goodness sake, and get them to complete the questionnaire as if this was the perfect culture. Ask them to forget what the existing organization is and just look at what the organization should be like in their perfect model. And then complete the analysis and see how that scores. And what you often find is there's a major discrepancy between the current and the target. So the current is actually what you've got. The target is what you might aspire to. And what you've then instantly got, sector by sector, you've got different sub-elements, 12 different sub-elements. You've instantly got a tool that provides a gap analysis. And all of a sudden, you've got a roadmap that says that if you want to change the culture, here's where you need to focus your activity. And you can start to derive implementation plans to close up those various gaps. What you can then do is repeat the analysis on an interim basis, maybe every 12 or 18 months. Don't forget, culture change is slow. Climate change is quick. Culture change is slow. And what you're able to do is to put an action plan together that will actively control and drive the culture change process, simply because you're measuring it. And you can measure it at intervals that allow you to feedback the process and the progress that's being made. I've got an example here of this is my previous organization, HFL, which was the Horse Racing Forensic Laboratory. And this is expressed, the same data, but expressed in the spidergram fashion. And don't worry about the particular structure. Suffice to say, it's the same 12 characteristics. We've got constructive styles. So these are humanistic, helpful styles up here. You've got defensive, passive styles, very bureaucratic. And you've got defensive, aggressive, power-centered styles here. What you need to look at here is the white line. This white line on the inside was the profile of the organization back in April 2002. Very, very low on the people-centered stuff. Very high on this defensive passive area here because it was a bureaucratic civil service organization. And kind of spiky on this defensive aggressive styles. Very much a power culture. Chief exec was the best forensic scientist in town, supposedly. So all decisions went through him or her, supposedly. So it was a strange culture to be operating in. We aspired to the orange line, which you can just about make out here, which comes around here on the green, and then in here on the right here on the red, and then the vermilion right down here as well. Complete transformation. And what you've got down the bottom here is the key that shows you how year after year after year after year we made progress towards that orange line because we knew where we were and we knew how to manage the process. Is this the only questionnaire? Is it the right questionnaire? Doesn't really matter. The key thing is you're using it in relative format, provided you don't change the questionnaire. If there's an issue with it, it's a systematic issue with it that's repeated year after year after year of use. What you're after is not the detail, you're after the relative shift. So you keep the questionnaire constant with any inadequacies, but then use that as your baseline for any change process. And what you're able to do is to put a gap analysis together that will drive the change process. Really powerful tool. But above all that, we know that we need more. We get this, and we still need the leadership input. We know that with the idea generation side, we've got a well-established mechanism here that has a creativity champion. We have creativity sessions. We have trained facilitators. And we have a pool of volunteers that we will pull in to assist senior managers in driving the change process. Key is the introduction of an innovation challenge owner. And the innovation challenge owner should be a member of the senior team, should be someone with enough clout to make a change in the organization. But just generating the idea isn't good enough. What we need behind that is a mechanism. And the mechanism we're recommending here is the introduction of what we're calling an innovation hub. Then what you need is a group of people that are handpicked change agents within the organization. These are individuals that are hell-bent on making the organization the very best organization they can be. The focus is on making a difference in the organization. And in any organization, you've got at least a handful of people who are sitting there going, crikey, if only I could get involved in making a difference in this business, then we'd do things very differently. These are the people that you want to get involved in this innovation hub. You need an innovation champion to coordinate them, and people will move in and out according to the various projects. But it's almost like it's the SAS. It's the ultimate. People should aspire to be a member of this innovation hub. They should be highly recognized. The senior team should value them as a major driver. So this link between senior management and the innovation hub is key. The innovation owners take the output from their creativity sessions, share it with the innovation hub. The innovation hub are the incubation mechanism that will take the germ of the idea that comes out of creativity, that will put the life support system around it, that have the cracking individuals, that will, if anyone's going to make this work, the people sit in this innovation hub. It's not a full-time job. In addition to your day job, part-time, you get involved when you need to take time. You've got regular critical reviews. The membership of it is going to change over time. This team has to deliver the innovation. And the critical review is exactly that. Is it being done on time? Is it being delivered? Are we making a difference? Have we dumbed it down? It's just become continuous improvement. If we have, then we need to go back and put the kick back in it. This is a step change we want. And we have the ability to point and kick out people from this team. This is a badge of honor to be a member of this team. And so if you're not performing, you should not have the badge of honor. You should be invited to leave. These are people who are hell-bent on making a difference in the organization. And with this structure in place, you generate the ideas, you incubate the ideas, you support the innovation challenge owners, senior managers, in driving the transformation through. You've got a team of people who are hell-bent on knocking down barriers. Then you've got a systematic approach that will drive the entire process. And you may have some bleed over between those involved in the creativity sessions and those who are involved in the innovation hub. Almost by definition, you'll have some, but not necessarily. You may have some people who are great at the ideation, others who are great at the implementation side. And that's what we're going to recommend, that organizations look very close. Now, you want to tailor it to your own means. So we're not saying this is a panacea, but it's all about accountability. We need people to step forward. We need to know who is going to make sure that what is going to happen that's going to make a complete difference to the organization, that's going to deliver that step change. And this is about accountability and people stepping forward and then putting a support mechanism around those individuals to actually deliver it. Now, we can help. This is kind of vaguely the salesy bit as we sign off. Obviously, we can assist with the various tools. So we've got the various matrices and analytical tools that we can assist with. More than happy to do that. We can obviously coach and mentor the Innovation Hub members, so we can get involved with that, and the champions in particular. And we can drive the external critical review. We can make it a true external critical review. People inside the organization often have difficulty with the critical nature of a review because they kind of understand why things didn't happen. Someone from outside the organization is naive. They've got an objectivity, which we all know about in the creative process, is the greatest asset. So someone from outside can come in and call the organization to account. And I'd recommend that either quarterly or every 3-4 months, you hold a critical review where the Innovation Hub members come together, maybe with the Innovation Challenge owners, and we say, right, well, who's doing what by when? Why is this not happening? What's the step change? Why is that dumbed down? And call the organization to account on the innovation process. Now, thanks for your attention. I said it was going to take about an hour. It's taken about an hour. I slightly tipped over 11 o'clock, but you guys know me. That was never going to happen and finish on time. The whole thing's recorded, so we'll make sure that's available. If I can just give you a trailer, if anyone's interested in following up on any of this stuff specifically and talking to us about it, I'll send the email out. Send me an email back anyway, and you've all got the email addresses for the Idea Centre. Email either myself, Alex, Caroline back. What we're also going to do is give you some information. We've produced an entire video library that breaks down all the creative problem-solving techniques now into small 2 or 3 minute chunks with a whole kind of indexing system around it. We'll send you information on that. There's a modest charge for it, but we'll send you that soon. We've also got an app that makes all the videos associated with the Idea Centre available on your mobile phone as well. So hang on and watch out for that. But hopefully, it's been an interesting hour. Hopefully you've got an insight. Hopefully the enthusiasm comes over, because there's a huge difference between generating the ideas and then making those ideas deliver in the organization. And the prize is not for the ideation process. The prize is for the delivery. We can help, and have a conversation with us. We can see how we can help embed this inside the organization on a systematic basis. That's what it's all about. So Thank you very, very much for your attention. It's been an absolute pleasure, and hopefully you got something out of it. And watch out later on. Do email me directly if you want a copy of it. Those people that have missed it will make sure that they are sent a copy regardless. Whether they like it or not, they're going to get a copy that they can potentially download and take from there. So it's been a pleasure. I'm going to sign off and shut up at this moment. Thanks very much indeed. Cheerio, bye.